Okay, here's a shortly longer video. Puffin here with another Antifa News Briefa. This one's going to be a little less Briefa because it's about Netanyahu terrorism. And terrorism needs a little bit more than a minute. I got this in TikTok type for people with that much time, but here's a little bit longer version. Netanyahu has been terrorizing the people of Gaza because he's a terrorist, and he's been doing it to stay in power. This is what we've barely avoided with Trump, because Trump is using terrorism to stay in power or to stay relevant or to stay out of jail. Like, there's a threat that if you arrest Trump, all his terrorist supporters will be activated at once and commit a bunch of terrorism. Now, they're being activated one by one. We saw one in Boulder, we saw one in Atlanta, we saw one in San Jose. Like, you're seeing them, every day or almost every week, carrying out these terrorist attacks. Maybe these are frustrated, racist, Trumper terrorist individuals who go out on their own, like lone wolves or something, or maybe they're activated terrorists by Trump's terrorist network. Like, we know that the El Paso shooter a few years back was a Trump terrorist, a racist terrorist, and then they had a Boston shooter later that day that they tried to blame on the left because he maybe made some social media posts. But we know, like Jaden X, we know that there are Trump terrorists who pose as leftists in order to make the left look bad or whatever. But that guy went out and killed some people in Boston later the afternoon that a Trump terrorist killed people in El Paso, to balance things out, but activated by the Trump terrorist network. So actually a Trump terrorist posing as a leftist. Okay, leftists don't really kill people. It's not really what they're about. Terrorism is not really what they're about. Okay, now we're talking about Putin meeting with the whoever that MyPillow looking guy, Dr. Phil looking guy from Belarus is. Putin met that guy on a boat, saw a news story about it, saw comments about, how those two should be killed. And they should, because they're terrorists. I mean, if you're going to kill any terrorist, you should kill them. But also Trump, because he's a terrorist. Like, when you start calling these people what they are, terrorists, and I'm a nonviolent person. I don't believe in violence personally or advocate violence. But you have these mechanisms for killing terrorists. You have all this will and power to kill terrorists. That's what you've supposedly been doing since, Bush repurposed the military to a war on terror. Like, we didn't have an opponent once the Soviet Union collapsed. You collapsed, Putin. You're not going to make up for it by killing a lot of Americans. But, so far, that's what you did through Trump. But yeah, so the Soviet Union collapsed, and you needed some type of enemy. So we went against some of the former allies, Osama bin Laden and stuff, activated him against himself, whatever, and started the war on terror. Well, now you've got a war on terror, and you've got all these weapons, and they work, and you're stronger than the police or your 10% military traitors. You can root them out / lock them up instead of letting them wander around or whatever. Like, are you afraid of your own people? You've got the weapons, you've got the orders, you've got the generals. Like, you've got the authorization to go against terrorists. So that includes Putin. Like, you could have blown that boat up. Nobody would have been sad about that. What, are you afraid of angering Russian generals or something? Just stop them too. Just, press the button to shut off their accounts or whatever. Do all that stuff. You don't have to kill a bunch of people. It wouldn't have hurt while you have all these powers to have taken out that boat with Putin and that Belarus guy. The Belarus guy wants to divert planes and stuff. Dude, you've taken it too far. No one's going to miss you, is what that comes down to, okay? No one's going to miss you. And that comes down to Trump too. The people that do miss you, that get all riled up and go out and commit terrorism because somebody finally does something to Trump, we're going to do that eventually anyway. Like, it's a strategy in Overwatch or video games to let one person come out and kill them, let another person come out and kill them. But when those people are coming out and killing 10 citizens every time at these soft targets like grocery stores, it's not a good strategy. This is real life. It's not a video game. Don't let the one terrorist come out, because there's going to be another one tomorrow. There's going to be another one the next day. There's going to be another one next week. Another Trump terrorist going out killing people. Unless you start making some examples of some of them. You've got to bust up the network. You've got to stop the actual terrorist network that activates them, that picks targets and goes out and activates them. You got to stop them. And you got to do something to put a damper on all just the crazies. Now you're worried about the crazies all popping off or that terrorist network being activated if you attack part of it. But shit, you weren't worried about that in Iraq when you attacked ISIS. You weren't worried about how they would retaliate or whatever. You just did the job because they were terrorists. So call these people what they are. Start treating a few of them like they are. Start treating Ted Cruz and Donald Trump like terrorists that they are. And, yank their Supreme Court justices out of there because they're terrorists appointed by a treasonous, terrorist, illegitimate president. Like, he wanted to say Obama was illegitimate because he was black or something. He wanted to say something that was wrong with Obama being president, that he was illegitimate. Trump is actually an illegitimate president. I mean, George Bush might have been an illegitimate president, stealing the election from Florida. Like, September 10th, the news came out that Gore won Florida. September 11th. Anyway, he stole that election. He could have been an illegitimate president, but nobody was even whining about that. Trump is even more illegitimate because he's a pawn of Putin. Okay, so let's back to Putin, back to Netanyahu, how we started this thing. Because Netanyahu's a terrorist who's been around longer than Putin or around just as long. I'm not sure who predates who. But Putin has been propping up Netanyahu. Putin picked Trump. Putin picked Bolsonaro. Putin picked Modi. The reason I mention these three countries, USA, Brazil, and India, is they have the worst Trump virus in the world. Oh yeah, in the future we call it the Trump virus. Okay, just so you know. This genocide that Putin is responsible for is called Trump virus genocide in the future, just so you know. And that's how he did it. He got Facebook, so arrest Mark Zuckerberg for genocide, treason, seize all his properties. You nationalize Facebook. Every country gets their own. There's a UN oversight, Facebook, whatever. That's how that's done. Nationalize that thing. Seize all Zuckerberg's property. He's a traitor. He's a terrorist. He knew all this stuff was going on. He got all the money from Russia. He did it intentionally. So the way Russia, Facebook, KGB, Putin did this was make a bunch of fake accounts, make everybody think that Trump was popular. They don't have the details on how they did that in America, but they have it in Brazil. They know that Twitter and Facebook removed 150,000 accounts, fake accounts from Twitter and Facebook that were promoting Bolsonaro 6 months, 8 months before the election. And then 3 days, once they'd already done all their work, because I heard about it on the BBC every night, so the BBC was playing a part too. Bolsonaro, so popular. And I'm like, how is this racist, terrible person, this Nazi, so popular? Just like, how is he so popular? How is Trump of the tropics so popular down there? Just like Trump of America was popular here. It's because of this troll factory, because they have actual human trolls paid, the KGB doing their side of it, and then Facebook doing their side of it with fake accounts, promoting these people that are terrible, evil people, to where regular people who don't really want to support terrorism end up doing it because it seems popular. And they get enough people to do that because it seems popular. They get enough groups to do this in Facebook because it seems popular that it happens. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And they removed the 150,000 accounts 3 days before the election. But after 6 months of popularizing it to where even the BBC is talking about how popular he is, they've done their work. But that's all KGB, Facebook orchestrated treason upon each country that they did it to, and treason upon humanity. Like, they are traitors to humanity by being such terrorists. Now, why did they do this? They did the same thing for Modi. They promoted Modi in India so that he could be the person to spread the Trump virus when it got out. He held big rallies. You don't have to have masks. He spread the Trump virus. He tried to genocide you in India, just like Trump tried to genocide us in the USA, and Bolsonaro tried to genocide not just his people, but the entire world in Brazil by saying it was his cultural right to destroy the rainforest. So screw that guy. Screw all these fascists. Okay, Netanyahu, back to Netanyahu, was bombing hospitals, bombing the only COVID clinic in Gaza, the only testing site in Gaza, trying to spread the virus as part of his terrorist war. All to stay in power. You're not going to stay in power, dude. Like, the story just last week was whoever your rival is, they won't tell us his name. Just like the BBC would never tell us the rival of Bolsonaro, but they would always tell us Bolsonaro. whoever his rival is trying to kick him out. I mean, been trying to kick him out, but there's going to be more pressure there. So you have the 500 Democratic staffers telling Biden, you've got to condemn Israel. But Biden sent Blinken, the ambassador to Israel, and I just noticed in the reporting on this on Daily Moth, the Def News, that Blinken is sitting without a mask on, smiling a few feet away from Netanyahu, smiling without a mask on. And then when they show him meeting leaders of the Palestinian Authority or whoever else he met on the Palestinian side, they're both wearing masks, sitting about the same distance apart, but they're both wearing masks, which is kind of like a sign of distrust. Basically, I promote wearing masks. I think people should just keep wearing masks. I'm going to keep wearing masks for a year. I don't give a damn. I'm going to keep wearing masks till it's all gone, and keep wearing masks just to say fuck Trump after this forever. And I just don't think I'm that pretty that it's worth other people's health. I think that's the new standard. It's like, you know what? It's not worth seeing that face to risk other people's health. So don't show it because you're not that pretty. But especially fascists. And so Netanyahu perpetrated all these acts of terror, on a bookstore, on the news media, like destroyed a bookstore, destroyed the news media, destroyed olive trees, like destroyed things that weren't hiding Hamas, destroyed things in order to kill people, in order to spread the virus, which is going to ultimately affect his own people. But he doesn't care because he's a fascist. He's a Nazi. And that's what the important thing is here. This should never devolve into anti-anyone sentiment because it's the Nazis, it's the parties who are responsible, who are pulling the puppet strings. It's Putin pulling the puppet strings, and some gas companies and defense companies or whatever, pulling these puppet strings of these fascists trying to keep this stuff going. Because if they don't have these puppets in power, then we take it over and we cancel oil and we cancel military. So Bernie supposedly put forth the measure to cancel the $735 million of military aid USA is giving to Israel. We just gave $5 million to Gaza and acted like that was something. But they're still giving $735 million in military aid on top of like $1 billion or $3 billion or something a year to pay for all their health care and stuff that they won't pay for Americans. But they do that extra almost $1 billion for military stuff to this terrorist government committing terrorist acts, or a terrorist president running. I mean, because, are we necessarily a terrorist government? Only especially when we're run by a terrorist president like Donald Trump. But Biden's being a terrorist supporter. Biden's supporting Netanyahu's terrorism in this case. And so guilty on that charge. You got to come back from that. And when at least the right is reporting that Biden is saying, get in front of my truck when you ask me about Palestine, or you ask me about Black Lives Matter, or whatever the question was that the reporter said, Biden said, get in front of my truck when you ask me that, and then gunned his truck and said, well, I'm only joking. The problem with that is Netanyahu just bombed the AP. Netanyahu bombed the media. And you didn't chastise him for it or even cancel the check. So Bernie says cancel the check, but he's the head of the budget committee. So wouldn't you think that as a power, I don't know, but as the power of the head of the budget committee, couldn't you just cancel the check? Like, Bernie, cancel the check. Do it yourself. Like, use your power, use your authority. Maybe people are overstepping their authority. But people aren't overstepping their authority too. Like, it would not be overstepping his authority for Biden to cancel student loan debt. Now, we're having trouble getting him to cancel the defense check to Netanyahu, who's a terrorist. That should be an easy sell. That should be an easy win. But if it's not, because of entrenched powers or people not recognizing that it's terrorism yet, then first of all, you point that out, and that comes back to bite you in other ways. But because the public opinion it just gets worse and worse. You can't keep doing these wars and these terrorist acts without people finding out about it. And I mean, I saw this kid rapping in front of the ruins of Gaza. It was awesome. I think I saw it on Facebook or YouTube. I'm not sure, but I was on Facebook for one day before I got banned again. But Yeah. I mean, it was a powerful thing to see a 12-year-old kid walking through the ruins of this bombed city, rapping about the suffering that he's in, and then hoping that kid's alive because he's so talented you want to hear from him again. That's more powerful than your stupid bombs. Okay, that's more powerful than your stupid Iron Dome. It's the power of people and the power of music and the power of creativity and a creative response to a violent and terrible oppressive situation. But that's what we're gonna do. And that's why I'm wearing the Antifa party hat. We're gonna do these things. We're gonna overpower you in so many different ways. There's not gonna be any military anymore in the future. Cash that out. Like, go ahead and stop paying for it. Stop paying for it anywhere because we don't need it anymore. And we're gonna shut it down. When the best use you could come up with for it for the last 20 years is fighting terrorism, and then you have these Trump terrorists running around, it didn't work. War didn't work. When the best congratulations you can give yourself for wars, World War II and stopping the Nazis. But then the Nazis took over America through Trump without firing any shots. War didn't work. War didn't solve that problem. And war isn't how they won it either. But they did perpetuate a genocide upon us and kill 3 million people around the world so far. At least 600,000 in America that Trump and Putin killed with the Trump virus. And they did all that with words and misinformation and social media power and Zuckerberg's consent and assistance. So they need to be held accountable. And when you hold them accountable, when you arrest Mark Zuckerberg, when you seize that property, when you run it properly instead of running it for a fascist agenda, then you actually have something good. It's crazy that like people kind of, I gave up on the internet because there's so many trolls on there and everybody's so negative on the internet. Like the internet has this promise and this power, just like a collective human mind, to solve all of our problems. I mean, for all of us to work together to solve all of our problems, to communicate and figure things out and make the world a better place. It has that potential. Now, some trolls decided to use it to have the potential to get attention for being negative. And then fascism, this Nazi specter, has taken that power and orchestrated it. They weaponized stupidity and weaponized evil, weaponized ignorance and just lowlifeness, weaponized being deplorable. And they put all that together into this thing to make sure we don't use the internet for what we can use it for, which is to interact and save the world. So let's win. Let's defeat them. They've all been orchestrated and organized into a Putin over Trump, over Netanyahu, over Bolsonaro, over Modi. Putin over these things like some hellish Christmas tree where Putin's the star at the top. Just take that star off. Just take this tree down, and we'll let a real tree grow in its place and decorate it with candles and pretty baubles and tinsel and wonderful ornaments and things. But not this scheme of fascism, this oppressive terrorist network that you see it all the time. It's all the comments, it's all the everything. And you guys are terrorist supporters if you're leaving comments. I said in my other videos, if some of these terrorists who are shooting people in mass shootings in America aren't Trumpers, leave it in comments. I got a bunch of comments, but no comments about that. So let me know if some of them aren't Trumpers. I'm sure some of them aren't, but let me know. Let's go ahead and talk about it. Because the more you find out about some of them, the more you find out that, yeah, they're Trump terrorists. They're doing this for Trump or because they're upset about Trump or whatever. And they're doing this, not getting away with it because they always kill themselves or get killed in the end because they're terrorists. But, or mostly, I guess some of them get shot in the leg and then you can find out what they were doing. You can find out later, but that's another part of the problem. The ones that don't get killed, you could find out what they were doing, what their motivations are. And either somebody has found that out and just isn't telling us because it's Trump, because Trump was their motivation. They don't want people to know. They don't want that story to get out yet. Or maybe they just haven't talked to him. But, people are obsessed with this stuff. And while there is another shooting that happens next to take people's minds off the last one, it seems like just a few days into, well, why did this person kill these people? and you find out it has to do with Trump, or it has to do with them being racist, or it has to do with something that shows that they're a Trumper, then all of a sudden the story seems to go away. People seem to lose interest. And I think that's just, again, more media orchestration, social media orchestration as well. People really jumping on any story that they can say, oh, this isn't a Trumper. This is, somebody else who killed these people. Let's jump on this and talk about how this. I've seen a lot of comments about that on, I think, a gang shooting, or a not necessarily Trumper terrorist shooting. But that was the exception to the ones we've been having this year. And it's got to stop. You can say stop it by rounding up all guns or something, which is the nightmare that people are trying to scare people with. Guns aren't the problem. It's not even, and I'm against guns, but guns aren't the problem. I think guns were better in video games. They're not the problem. You don't need to spend $1 billion, which they just did, on beefing up security at the Capitol. That's not the problem. The problem is the people who are willing to attack the Capitol. It's just a network of terrorist Trumpers. 10% of them were in the military. So you kind of know a lot about these people. You could just call them into a meeting and then arrest them there. Like, are you trying to let them slide? Are you trying to let this insurgent element continue to rear its head again, or just to keep spreading the virus? There's not a winning game in that, other than keeping people tense and against each other. That's, I guess, been a part of the game all this time. But there's not a winning game in keeping that tension there. You might as well let these losers know they lost. Let them know they're going to keep losing. They're not going to win. Like, all these people are like, over my cold dead fingers. Like, you might have 300 guns, but against like a Predator drone, you're only going to fire 2 of them, and they're not going to do anything. You only got 2 hands. Like, if the military was against the terrorists, including the Trump terrorists, this would be over real quick. There might be some violence, but it would be over real quick. People wouldn't be getting any ideas that this was a good idea anymore, and they'd shut it down. And you wouldn't have these little random terrorists popping up mad about Trump killing people, or mad about the fact that they can't make racist statements at work. If at the very least, the San Jose shooter, whether they ever talk about him being a Trumper, whether they ever talk about him being a terrorist Trumper, a Trumper terrorist, whether they ever talk about that or not, he was a racist who made racist statements at work and was going to get reprimanded for those racist statements. And instead of dealing with that, he killed 9 people and himself. That's a terrible, terrible thing to do, and a terrible way to be, and a terrible way to go out, a terrible way to end other people's lives and cause suffering for hundreds and thousands of people, all because you're racist. Get over the racism already. We can help you out of the racism. It's not something, we hate you for being racist. You're a victim of racism too, because someone taught you to be racist. So it's not like, we don't want any racists because we hate you and we don't want you to exist. We would rather you not exist and kill 9 other people or whatever. But it's not like we hate you. It's we want you to stop being racist. We want you to stop being part of a racist system. We want you to stop being part of a racist network that's apologizing and claiming they're not racist, while at the same time being as racist as they possibly can be. You just got to quit. And if it helps you quit for Donald Trump to be hauled in, then it's a favor we need to do for you as Americans. It's like, we need to end the fascism, need to end the evil. And Jesus is Antifa. I can explain that in my book, The Art of Betrayal by God, or the upcoming The Book of Judas. And some other stuff. I can explain that in a video too. Jesus is Antifa. People who know what I'm talking about. The only sin that's not forgiven is a sin against the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit's telling you, Jesus is Antifa. Okay? Nothing wrong with Antifa. Everyone's Antifa at heart. All it means is anti-fascist. It means you're against evil. You're against fascist oppression. Everyone's always been against fascist oppression. The fact that all fascist oppression has left, in addition to all the weapons in the world, all the biggest bombs and all the whatever, all the powers of government, are still words. They're still relying on these words being able to be twisted around. So if we put the words out there untwisted, or if we put the words out there smoking out the twisted ones, so that we have clear words to speak, then, we got this. Like, there's nothing we can't do, okay? Like, we don't need any type of correction. You can just say what's on your mind and on your heart, and these words will work. This is magic. It's simple magic. That's why I do this. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for commenting. Comment. Because comments are key. Comments are conversation. Even if you're arguing with me, if you're a stupid troll, dude, I eat it up. I eat trolls for breakfast. This is my breakfast. So thanks for sharing it with me. And if you're not a stupid troll, if you're like an intelligent person, I get some of those comments sometimes too. That's awesome. I'm so glad that Uriah Heep, I think, started following me recently. He's got a great name from a great band that I didn't listen enough to, but now that I'm listening to more Jethro Tull, I'm like, I should probably listen to a lot more of these bands that I've heard of. Boney M. I heard a disco band called Boney M that I'd never heard of before. Oh my gosh, they're amazing. And I started watching Klaus Nomi. I guess I'd seen him before. I'd seen people inspired by him before. I read Flaming Carrot Comics by Bob Burden. But yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know. I don't know if I know him now. But that's the thing, is people have been doing stuff against war, against fascism, in states that seem even more hopeless than this. This seems hopeless, but it's not. We're going to work through it, and we're going to do it. And this is actually a big turning point where, again, they can't kill 260 people without there being enough video and horror about it that they look really bad for doing that. And they should. You're terrorists. You can't be terrorists and it be a good look. You can have these people trying to whitewash it and cover it over and say it's okay, but it's just not. They end up looking bad themselves trying to do that. So we need the strongest statements against it. We need the most support against that. And we need some examples of these terrorists, not just getting killed after killing a bunch of people, but getting stopped in the act, getting stopped beforehand, or mostly their organizers, their leaders like Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. We need them to be just arrested for terrorism, for treason, for genocide. Just go ahead and arrest them. You got the authorization, you got the skills, you got the powers, you got the will. And no one's going to miss them. Promise you. Really, no one's going to miss them. Because once they're gone, it all just crumbles. It all falls apart. And you don't go back to that. It's like after the pandemic. We don't go back to the way things used to be. We start a new way. And we can do it without capitalism. We can do it without any of the things that have been problematic in the past. That's not bad. That's not something to be afraid of. It's different. It's going to be fun. It's going to be good. It's going to be helpful to everyone. If it's not helpful to everyone, we're not going to do it. That's going to be a new standard for us. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. And thanks for hoping and believing and doing something. Because everything we do contributes to the magic of bringing this world. The more we can do something that believes in the world without evil and terrorism and violence, the more it actually happens. So, let's do it. Thanks for watching. Thanks, YouTube, for letting this stuff exist here and giving us a platform to do it. But we'll do it all. We'll do it in all sorts of ways. We'll do it online. We'll do it in person. We'll write books and write songs and show the world there's a new, better world coming, and show the people that would otherwise be terrorists. They don't have to be so desperate and racist and terrible. There is another way. We'll all help you to it. We'll all help you find it. We would all rather you be a good, happy person who feels part of a community than someone isolated and upset and willing to commit terrorism. And that goes for Trump. I mean, Trump has been an isolated, unloved, pathetic, terrible person who then got this type of love and adoration from filling the role of being like this fascist overlord. That's not a good look. No one really wants that in the long run. And everybody who got off on cheering it on looks really gross and bad when you see what it amounts to. So let's stop it, help all of them out of it, help them out of it in some type of re-education center if you need to, but hopefully just the re-education of conversation, of free speech, of actually having it and calling it what it is so that people can realize, hey, I don't want to be part of that. I want out. I want to be American again. So thanks for watching. Let's be American again, and let's be human again and betray all these evil traitors and fascists. See you soon.